In 1875, being a woman who could read was dangerous. Being a woman who taught other girls to read was practically a death sentence. Sarah Bennett is about to learn this the hard way. 8 months pregnant and armed with only her books, she's now running for her life through the Wyoming Territory. Her crime? Teaching young girls that they deserve more than just marriage and motherhood. The settlers have branded her a threat to their way of life, and now they're hunting her down. Just when all hope seems lost, a mysterious cowboy named Lucas Drake finds her. He offers her shelter on his remote ranch, a chance not just to survive, but to keep teaching. But with angry settlers closing in and her baby due any day, Sarah faces an impossible choice. Will she give up her mission to save herself, or risk everything for what she believes in? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The floorboards of the old barn creaked beneath Sarah Bennett's feet as she moved between the makeshift rows of crates and upturned buckets that served as desks. 6 young girls hunched over their primers, candlelight flickering across their determined faces. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled, but in here, the only sound was the scratch of pencils on paper and the soft whisper of turning pages. Sarah paused behind Mary Thompson, her first student, now 12. The girl's copper hair caught the candlelight as she carefully formed her letters. 6 months ago, Mary had stood in Sarah's vegetable garden, watching her write in her journal. "Miss Bennett," she'd said, "could you teach me to do that?" Those 5 words had changed everything. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly as she leaned over Mary's shoulder. "Beautiful penmanship," she whispered. The girl's face lit up with pride. In the corner of the page, Mary had drawn a tiny bird in flight. A sudden thud against the barn door made them all freeze. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she quickly gathered the books, motioning for the girls to stay quiet. But it was only a branch, blown by the wind. Still, they couldn't be too careful. Not anymore. "That's enough for today," Sarah said, softly, helping the youngest girls pack away their slates. "Remember, these books are our secret. Keep them hidden, just like we practiced." As the girls filed out into the gathering dusk, Mary lingered behind. "Miss Bennett?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Pa was talking with Mr. Harrison at the general store. They were saying it ain't right for girls to learn reading and figures." She twisted her worn apron in her hands. "They said it puts dangerous ideas in our heads." Sarah knelt before her student, ignoring the protest of her aching back. "Mary, listen to me. Knowledge isn't dangerous. Ignorance is. Every time you learn something new, every time you read a book or solve a problem, you're lighting a candle in the dark. Nobody can take that light from you." Through the barn's weathered walls, Sarah could see lanterns being lit in distant farmhouses. Soon the girls would be missed if they didn't hurry home. She thought of her own home, the small cabin on the edge of town where threatening notes had begun appearing nailed to her door. "Go on now," she urged, giving Mary a gentle hug. "Tomorrow, we'll start Jane Eyre. I think you're ready for it." After the last girl disappeared into the twilight, Sarah gathered her teaching materials into a false-bottomed basket. Her fingers brushed against the class roster hidden in its secret compartment, a list of names that could condemn them all if found, but she couldn't bring herself to burn it. These names were more than just ink on paper. They were proof that something extraordinary was happening here in this dusty corner of Wyoming Territory. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if sharing her determination. Sarah smiled, remembering the words her own mother had written to her from back east. "A child is a promise to the future." She was fighting for more than just these 6 girls now. She was fighting for her daughter, and for every daughter who would come after. As she made her way home through the deepening darkness, Sarah caught snippets of conversation from the saloon. Male voices, angry and loud, carrying on the wind. Women getting above themselves, thinking they're too good for honest work, or filling their heads with nonsense. Sarah clutched her basket tighter and quickened her pace. The light in her cabin window beckoned like a beacon, but she knew it offered only temporary shelter. The storm that had been building these past months was about to break. She could feel it in the air, thick with tension, like the moments before lightning strikes. But she had made her choice that day in the garden with Mary. Education was worth any price. These girls deserved every opportunity, every chance to write their own stories. And if that meant becoming the witch the town feared she was, then so be it. She would teach until they forced her to stop, and even then she would find a way to pass on what she knew. The light of knowledge, once lit, could never truly be extinguished. The next morning came with the sharp crack of a fist against Sarah's door. She jerked awake in her rocking chair, the blanket sliding from her shoulders. She'd fallen asleep reading again, her copy of Jane Eyre open in her lap. "Miss Bennett!" Thomas Harrison's voice boomed through the thin wood. "Open up!" Sarah's hands shook as she smoothed her skirts and tucked the book beneath a loose floorboard. Harrison was Mary's uncle and, more importantly, chairman of the town council. She opened the door to find him red-faced, clutching a piece of paper, covered in careful handwriting. "Explain this." He thrust the paper at her. Sarah's heart sank as she recognized Mary's practiced letters, a story she'd written about a girl who became a doctor. "Mr. Harrison, my brother's girl, writing about wanting to cut people open like some kind of savage. This is your doing." He jabbed a finger at her belly. "And in your condition, no less. No decent woman would—" "Uncle Thomas?" Mary appeared behind him, face pale but chin lifted. "I wrote it because I want to help people, like how Doc Miller helped Ma before she died." Harrison grabbed Mary's arm. "Get home. Your father will deal with you." He turned back to Sarah. "As for you, there's a town meeting tonight. Be there, or we'll come to you." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Throughout the day, more parents discovered their daughters' secret education. Sarah watched from her window as mothers hurried past, averting their eyes. Some clutched books or papers, evidence of their daughters' corruption. By afternoon, she'd received 3 more threatening notes, each more violent than the last. The town hall was packed that evening, the autumn air thick with tobacco smoke and hostility. Sarah sat alone in the front row, her back straight despite the ache. She counted familiar faces, parents of her students, shopkeepers who'd once greeted her warmly, neighbors who'd brought her soup when morning sickness had kept her bedridden. Harrison stood at the podium, holding up Mary's story. "This woman," he spat the word, "has been filling our daughters' heads with dangerous ideas, teaching them to want more than their proper place, making them question the natural order of things." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "My Ruth's been talking back," someone called out, "saying she wants to do more than just marry. Young Miller's boy found Elizabeth reading instead of doing her chores." The accusations flew like arrows. Sarah stood, steadying herself against a chair. "These girls have minds of their own. All I've done is show them how to use them. And that's the problem." Harrison slammed his hand down. "Women thinking for themselves. That's what's ruining this territory. Look at you, unmarried and in your condition, teaching rebellion instead of showing proper shame." Sarah's face burned, but she held her ground. "Is that what this is really about? Not that I'm teaching girls to read, but that I'm teaching them they have value beyond what men decide." A hush fell over the room. Even Harrison seemed taken aback by her directness. "I won't stop," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "Every girl deserves to know she can be more than just someone's wife or mother, that she can dream, create, discover." "Enough!" Harrison's face had turned purple. "This ends now. You have until sunrise to leave town, or we'll escort you out ourselves." He turned to the crowd. "Anyone caught helping her or sending their daughters to her will face the same consequences." As the meeting dissolved into chaos, Sarah felt a small hand slip into hers. It was Mary, tears streaming down her face. "Don't go, Miss Bennett, please." "Mary Thompson," her father bellowed, "get away from that woman." Sarah squeezed Mary's hand before letting go. "Remember what I taught you," she whispered. "Your mind is your own. No one can take that from you. The walk home was long and dark. Sarah's feet were swollen, her back screaming in protest, but her mind was racing. She had known this day might come, had prepared for it, but the reality was still staggering. As she approached her cabin, something caught her eye, a piece of paper nailed to her door. Unlike the previous threats, this one contained just 3 words: midnight. They're coming. Sarah's hand went to her belly, feeling her daughter's restless movement. There was no time for fear now. She had until midnight to disappear. Sarah worked through the night, her hands trembling as she packed her most precious books into a leather satchel. Her journal lay open on the table, its pages filled with her teaching philosophy and the progress of each student. She couldn't bear to leave it behind. It was evidence of everything they'd achieved. Dawn hadn't yet broken when she heard the horses. Peering through her curtains, she counted 6 mounted figures approaching the barn where she taught. Their lanterns swayed in the pre-dawn darkness like angry fireflies. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed her satchel and ran. The dewy grass soaked her skirts as she cut through the fields, taking the back way to the barn. She had to get there first, had to save what she could. She reached the barn's back door just as the first shouts erupted from the front. "Come out, Miss Bennett! We know you're in there?" Sarah's fingers fumbled with the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards where she kept the girls' books and writing materials. The voices grew closer, boots heavy on wooden planks. "Teaching our daughters to rebel against God's natural order." That was Harrison's voice, thick with rage and whiskey. "Time to cleanse this place." The first crash came as Sarah was pulling out the last of the books. They were breaking things, the makeshift desks, the chalkboard she'd fashioned from, a spare piece of lumber. Each crack of splintering wood felt like a physical blow. "Look here!" Someone had found one of the primers she'd missed. "More evidence of her wickedness!" Sarah clutched her satchel and pressed herself against the back wall, heart pounding. The baby kicked frantically, sensing her fear. She had to stay calm, had to think clearly. Burn it all. The sharp smell of lamp oil filled the air. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. They wouldn't really... The first flames caught with a whoosh. Orange light flickered through the cracks between boards as smoke began to curl under the door. They were really going to burn down the barn. "Wait!" Mary's voice cut through the chaos. "Please, you can't!" "Mary Thompson, you get back home right now." Her father's voice cracked like a whip. "No! Miss Bennett taught us about more than just reading. She taught us to think for ourselves, to—" The sound of a slap echoed through the barn, followed by Mary's cry of pain. Something in Sarah snapped. She threw open the back door, stepping into the growing light. "Stop this!" Her voice carried across the yard. "If you want to hurt someone, hurt me, but leave my students alone." The men turned, startled by her appearance. In the growing dawn light, Sarah could see their faces clearly now. Men she'd known, men whose children she'd taught to read in secret. Some looked ashamed, others angry, a few frightened. Harrison stepped forward, torch in hand. "This is your last chance, Miss Bennett. Renounce this foolishness. Swear you'll stop teaching girls above their station." Sarah straightened her spine, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her precious satchel of books. "Teaching isn't foolishness. Knowledge isn't a sin, and I will never stop believing that every girl deserves the chance to learn." "Then you've made your choice." Harrison tossed his torch onto the oil-soaked hay. The barn erupted in flames, years of dry wood catching quickly. Sarah watched her schoolhouse burn, the heat searing her face. Mary struggled in her father's grip, tears streaming down her cheeks. The other men began to gather books from inside, tossing them into the inferno, pages curled and blackened, stories turning to ash. But even as she watched her work literally go up in flames, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. They could burn the books, destroy the barn, but they couldn't erase what she'd taught these girls. The knowledge was already inside them, taking root like seeds in fertile soil. "This isn't over," Harrison warned, his face grotesque in the firelight. "We're forming a proper committee. No more of this gentle persuasion. You have until sundown to leave town, or we'll run you out." Ourselves. The men mounted their horses and rode away, leaving Sarah alone with the burning barn. As the sun rose fully, casting long shadows across the smoking ruins, she made her decision. She wouldn't run. Not yet. There were still girls who needed to learn, still minds hungry for knowledge. She would teach in secret, in shadows and whispers if she had to. And when they finally forced her out, she would find another place, another way. Because somewhere out there, she knew there had to be others who believed as she did. That education was a right, not a privilege, and that every mind deserved the chance to grow. The baby kicked again, gentler now, as if in agreement. Sarah patted her belly softly. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "They can burn our books, but they can't burn what we know. Not ever." Sarah waited until the moon was high before she made her move. She'd spent the day watching men post wanted posters around town, her own face staring back at her, the words "corrupter of youth" printed in bold letters beneath. Now, in the dead of night, she crept from her cabin one final time. Her breath frosted in the cold air as she made her way through back alleys, avoiding the main street where Harrison's men kept watch. The weight of her satchel pulled at her shoulder, and her swollen belly made stealth difficult. But she'd planned this route carefully, knowing every shadow and corner of the town she'd called home for the past year. A dog barked in the distance. Sarah froze, pressing herself against a wall. Boots crunched on gravel nearby. "Check the schoolmarms." "Place again," a voice growled. "Harrison wants to make sure she ain't trying anything foolish." Sarah waited until the footsteps faded before moving on. At the edge of town, she paused behind the general store. Beyond lay open country, miles of wilderness between settlements. In her condition, it was madness to attempt such a journey. But staying meant something worse than death. It meant surrendering everything she believed in. The first mile was the hardest. Every snap of a twig made her heart jump. Every rustle of wind sounded like pursuing hoofbeats. The moon cast long shadows that seemed to reach for her with grasping fingers. When she finally crested the first ridge and looked back, the town was just a cluster of dim lights in the valley. But her relief was short-lived. As she started down, the other side, her foot caught on a hidden root. She stumbled, managing to catch herself, but wrenching her ankle in the process. The pain shot up her leg like fire. "Keep going," she whispered to herself, to her unborn child. "We have to keep going." The temperature dropped as night deepened. Sarah pulled her shawl tighter, wishing she'd been able to bring more warm clothing. But speed and stealth had been more important than comfort. Her ankle throbbed with each step, and the baby seemed restless, moving more than usual. A wolf howled somewhere in the darkness. Sarah quickened her pace despite the pain, and her foot slipped on loose shale. This time she couldn't catch herself. She fell hard, managing to twist so she landed on her side rather than her belly. For a moment she lay there in the dirt, fighting back tears. Everything hurt. Her ankle, her back, her pride. The baby kicked frantically, and Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly, to calm both herself and her child. That's when she heard it, the distant sound of horses. They'd discovered her absence sooner than she'd expected. Panic gave her new strength as she struggled to her feet. But which way? In the dark, every direction looked the same. The sound grew closer. Lantern light appeared on the ridge she'd crossed earlier, bobbing like evil spirits in the night. Sarah limped toward a dense thicket, praying it would offer some cover. There! Tracks heading east! Her heart nearly stopped. They were following her trail. She hadn't thought to hide it. Stupid, stupid mistake. The kind of mistake that could cost everything. The thicket scratched at her face and caught at her clothes as she pushed through it. Branches seemed to grab at her hair, and thorns tore at her skirts, but she kept going, ignoring the sting of countless small cuts. Behind her, the voices grew closer. The night air carried their words clearly. Now she can't have gone far, not in her condition. Spread out, check every hollow and thicket. Sarah broke through the other side of the brambles into a small clearing. The moon emerged from behind a cloud, illuminating her surroundings with cruel clarity. Her heart sank. She'd reached the edge of a steep ravine. There was nowhere left to run. The baby kicked again, hard enough to make her gasp. Sarah pressed one hand to her belly, the other clutching her precious satchel of books. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The sounds of pursuit grew ever closer. Sarah looked desperately around the clearing, searching for any escape route. That's when she saw it, a narrow path leading down the ravine's side. It was steep and treacherous, especially in the dark, but it was her only chance. As she started down the path, the first rider broke through the thicket behind her. Sarah didn't look back. She couldn't afford to hesitate now. Everything, her future, her child's future, everything she'd fought for, depended on what she did in the next few moments. The ravine path crumbled beneath Sarah's feet as she descended. Above, lantern light swept the edge of the cliff, voices calling out in the darkness. Her injured ankle screamed with each step, but she forced herself to keep moving. A rock shifted under her weight, sending a cascade of pebbles down the slope. Sarah grabbed at a scraggly bush, barely catching herself. The baby kicked hard, making her gasp. "Down there! I heard something!" Panicked, Sarah tried to move faster. Her foot slipped again, and this time the bush wasn't enough to hold her. She fell, sliding down the rocky incline, struggling to protect her belly as sharp stones tore at her dress and skin. She came to a stop at the bottom of the ravine, the taste of blood in her mouth from where she'd bitten her lip. Everything hurt. The precious satchel of books had torn open, pages scattered like broken butterflies in the moonlight. "You look like you could use some help, ma'am." The deep voice came from the shadows. Sarah scrambled backward, searching for a weapon, finding only loose stones. A man stepped into the moonlight, leading a large bay horse. He moved with the easy grace of someone used to hard country, though he held his hands up in a gesture of peace. A cavalry officer's badge glinted on his worn leather vest. "Name's Lucas Drake," he said quietly, "and unless I miss my guess, you're the schoolteacher they're hunting up there." Sarah pushed herself to her feet, wincing. "Are you with them?" A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "Ma'am, I haven't been with anyone since the war ended, but I do know what it's like to be hunted." Above them, the voices grew closer. Lucas's expression hardened as he heard them, and something in his eyes made Sarah think he recognized the voices and didn't like their owners. "They'll find this path soon," he said, gathering up her scattered books with surprising gentleness. "My ranch is about 3 miles west. It's your choice, but I've got coffee brewing and a warm barn. No questions asked." Sarah studied him in the moonlight. He was older than she'd first thought, maybe 40, with silver threading his dark hair. His face bore the marks of hard years, but his eyes were kind. More importantly, she saw something in them she recognized. The look of someone who'd stood against the tide. The baby kicked again, as if offering an opinion. Sarah pressed a hand to her side. "Why would you help me?" "Because I've seen what happens when good people stay silent." He touched the cavalry badge briefly. "Fought a war over it, matter of fact." A shout from above made them both look up. The lantern light was moving closer to the path. "Time's up, ma'am. What's it going to be?" Sarah thought of Mary's face when she discovered the joy of reading. Of all the girls who still needed someone to believe in them, of her unborn daughter, who deserved to grow up in a world where knowledge wasn't a crime. "I accept your offer, Mr. Drake." He helped her onto his horse with careful hands, then swung. Up behind her, the warmth of him at her back was oddly reassuring after the cold night. "Just Lucas," he said, turning the horse westward. "Hold tight. We'll have to ride fast for a bit." They moved through the darkness like ghosts, Lucas guiding the horse along paths Sarah could barely see. Every hoofbeat carried them further from the search party, whose voices gradually faded behind them. Dawn was just beginning to paint the eastern sky when they crested a rise. Below them stretched a valley, and in its heart sat a sturdy ranch house with outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a light burned in the window, just as he'd promised. "Welcome to Sanctuary Ranch," Lucas said softly. "It's not much, but it's safe. Been a while since I had visitors, but I reckon that's about to change." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, from exhaustion, relief, or both, she wasn't sure. "I can't stay long. They'll look for me here. Let them look." There was steel in his voice now. "I've dealt with bullies before. Besides," he added more gently, "seems to me that baby of yours might appreciate a proper roof overhead when it decides to make its appearance." As if in agreement, the baby gave another kick. Sarah found herself smiling despite everything. "She's been quite vocal tonight." "She, is it?" Lucas clicked to the horse, starting them down the slope. "Well, then, guess I'd better get started on fixing up the old schoolroom out back. Can't have a young lady growing up without proper education." For the first time since the barn burning, Sarah felt something like hope. Maybe, just maybe, she'd found more than just shelter here. Maybe she'd found an ally in her fight for change. Dawn painted the ranch house in shades of gold as Sarah explored her new surroundings. The main house was larger than it had appeared in the dark, built from sturdy logs with a wraparound porch that spoke of careful craftsmanship. Inside, she discovered something unexpected, a small library tucked away in the back room. "My mother's books," Lucas explained, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "She taught at a ladies' seminary back east before coming out here with my father." He handed her a cup, his eyes catching the deed framed on the wall, the Drake family's legitimate claim to this land, dating back 15 years. Sarah ran her fingers along the spines of the books, finding familiar friends. Shakespeare, Austen, even some advanced mathematics texts. "She taught you to read and cipher," Lucas smiled slightly. "Said a man's mind needs cultivation same as any field." A pounding at the front door made them both tense. Sarah instinctively moved deeper into the library shadows. "Drake, get out here!" The voice was rough with anger. Lucas's face hardened. "Stay here," he murmured, setting down his coffee. Sarah watched through the window as he stepped onto the porch to face 3 mounted men. "Ned Benson," Lucas's voice carried clearly. "Bit early for social calls." The leader, a thick-necked man with a red face, leaned forward in his saddle. "Word is you're harboring that troublemaking schoolteacher. Harrison's offering a reward for information." "Is he now?" Lucas's tone remained casual, but Sarah noticed his hand resting near his holstered gun. "And what business is that of yours?" "That woman's poison," Benson spat. "Teaching girls ideas above their station. Next thing you know, they'll be wanting to vote, own property. Can't have that kind of thinking spreading out here. My land, my business." Lucas shifted slightly, blocking the door more fully. "Unless you've got a warrant, I suggest you move along." One of Benson's companions edged his horse forward. "Now see here, Drake, we're being neighborly, giving you fair warning. That woman's made enemies, powerful ones. You want to keep your ranch peaceful. You'll turn her out." "Appreciate the warning." Lucas's voice had gone cold. "Now get off my property." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. After a tense moment, Benson wheeled his horse around. "You're making a mistake, Drake. There'll be consequences." "Wouldn't be the first time." Lucas watched until they disappeared down the road before coming back inside. Sarah met him in the main room, her hands trembling slightly. "I should go. I won't bring trouble to someone who's shown me kindness." "You're not bringing trouble," Lucas said firmly. "Trouble's been here since people like Harrison and Benson decided they could dictate who deserves knowledge and who doesn't." He gestured to the ranch around them. "I didn't fight a war for freedom just to bow to petty tyrants in peacetime." Sarah sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The baby was active again, responding to her stress. "But your ranch is mine, legally and morally." Lucas pulled out his mother's deed, handing it to Sarah. "My parents built this place as a haven, a spot of civilization in the wilderness. Ma taught the local children, boys and girls both, right up until she died." Sarah studied the document, noting the official seals. "What happened?" "Fever. Took both my parents 5 years ago. I came back from the war to keep the place going." His eyes grew distant. Saw enough fighting to know that sometimes standing your ground is the only choice a conscience allows. The morning sun streamed through the windows, warming the room. Sarah could hear the normal sounds of ranch life outside. Horses nickering, chickens clucking, the distant bawl of cattle. It felt almost peaceful, despite the recent confrontation. "There's a room upstairs," Lucas said quietly. "Gets good light. Might make a fine classroom, if anyone was of a mind to teach." Sarah looked up sharply, meeting his steady gaze. "You can't mean, like I said, my mother believed in education. So do I." He smiled slightly. "Ranch hands' daughters deserve same chances as anyone. If someone wanted to continue their schooling, well, that'd be their choice. For the first time in days, Sarah felt the knot of tension in her chest begin to loosen. Here was a man who understood, who had fought for principles and continued to stand by them. Perhaps she hadn't just found shelter, but a true ally in her cause. The baby kicked again, and this time Sarah smiled, resting her hand on her belly. "Well, little one," she whispered, "it seems we might have found our sanctuary after all." 3 weeks passed quietly at Sanctuary Ranch. Sarah converted the upstairs room into a classroom, using what she could salvage from her rescued books and Lucas's mother's old teaching materials. She started with just 2 students, Emma and Rose, daughters of the ranch's foreman, who looked at books the way starving people look at bread. "Miss Bennett," Emma whispered one morning, her small fingers tracing letters in chalk dust. "Pa says you're the bravest person he knows, 'cept maybe Mr. Drake." Sarah glanced up from where she was sketching a map of the world on a piece of salvaged wood. Through the window, she could see Lucas in the yard below, helping his men repair a wagon. He'd taken to positioning himself where he could keep watch during lesson times. "Your father's a brave man himself," Sarah replied, remembering how the foreman had stood up to Benson's threats. "It takes courage to want better for your children." Rose, the younger sister, looked up from her primer. "Is that why the town folks were so mad? 'Cause they ain't brave enough to want better?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "Sometimes people fear what they don't understand, but fear doesn't make them right." A sound at the door made them all turn. Lucas stood there, hat in hand, trail dust still on his clothes. "Ladies," he said, nodding to the girls, "mind if I borrow Miss Bennett for a moment?" The girls giggled as Sarah followed him downstairs. In the kitchen, the smell of coffee mingled with fresh-baked bread. Sarah had insisted on earning her keep, despite Lucas's protests. "Got word from town," he said quietly, accepting the cup she offered. "Harrison's men have been questioning folks at every ranch within 50 miles. But," he added with a slight smile, "seems not everyone's as eager to help them as they'd like." Sarah sank into a chair, one hand automatically going to her lower back. The baby was due in less than a month now. "Other ranchers' wives?" Lucas nodded. "Seems your students' mothers have been talking, quiet-like, but steady, about how their girls came home knowing things, useful things, about how reading meant they could help with the accounts, write letters to relatives back east. Knowledge spreads," Sarah said softly, "like seeds in the wind." Speaking of which, Lucas reached into his vest and pulled out something that made Sarah's breath catch, a small leather-bound copy of Jane Eyre. "How did you—" "Foreman's wife took a trip to the next town over. Said she had a notion you might be missing this particular story." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Seems she remembers her own mother reading it to her back in Ohio." Sarah took the book with trembling hands. "Thank you, both of you. There's more." Lucas sat across from her, his expression growing serious. 3 more families have asked if their daughters might come for lessons. Ranch hands from the North Valley, good people who keep to themselves. "It's dangerous," Sarah protested, though her heart leaped at the thought. "For them, for you, life's dangerous," Lucas interrupted gently. "Question is whether the risk is worth the reward." He gestured to the classroom above. "Those girls up there, they're already different, standing taller, asking questions. Their mothers see it, their fathers see it. Can't put that light out once it's lit." Through the open window, they could hear Emma and Rose reading aloud together, their young voices carried on the autumn breeze. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Damn these pregnancy emotions, and quickly blinked them away. "I've been thinking," Lucas continued, his voice careful, measured. "That room upstairs, it could hold more desks, and the old storage shed out back might make a fine proper schoolhouse with some work, if someone was planning to stay on a while." The invitation, in his words, was clear. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, at the strength in his weathered hands, the kindness in his eyes, the silver in his hair that spoke of wisdom earned through hard years. Here was a man who understood that some battles were worth fighting, that some causes were worth any price. "More desks would be nice," she said softly. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. Still, she saw the worry he tried to hide. They both knew that Harrison and his kind wouldn't give up easily, that this fragile peace they'd found could shatter at any moment. But for now, there were lessons to teach, minds to nurture, and hope taking root like prairie grass after rain, stubborn, resilient, and impossible to destroy once it had taken hold. The first snow came early that year, dusting Sanctuary Ranch in white, while dark clouds gathered ominously over the mountains. Lucas studied his weather-worn map in the lamplight, marking routes that would soon be impassable. The supply run to town couldn't be delayed much longer. "You're worried," Sarah said, setting a cup of coffee beside him. She'd grown to read his moods as easily as her beloved books. "Storm's coming." He traced the mountain pass with his finger. "Big one. Town's our closest source of supplies, but after what happened at Miller's trading post yesterday..." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she sat down. The news had arrived with one of the ranch hands. Harrison's men had caught Miller selling paper and pencils to a ranch wife. They'd made an example of his store. "I'll go," Lucas said quietly. "First light tomorrow. Better to face them head on than let them think we're afraid." "Be careful." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The baby had been restless all day, and her back ached fiercely. "Harrison's men won't try anything in broad daylight. Not with witnesses, but they both knew that was optimistic. The town was changing, fear poisoning it like a well gone bad. Dawn broke grey and cold. Sarah watched from the upstairs window as Lucas rode out, his breath frosting in the air. She tried to focus on preparing for the day's lessons, but the pain in her back had grown worse, spreading around to her sides in a way that made her uneasy. The girls arrived bundled against the cold, 5 of them now with 2 more families, asking about lessons. They were working on geography when the first real contraction hit. Sarah gripped the edge of her desk, trying to hide her discomfort. But Emma, sharp-eyed as her father, noticed. "Miss Bennett, are you all right?" "Just tired, dear. Now who can tell me about the capital of..." Another pain, stronger this time. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. It was too soon. Lucas wouldn't be back for hours. Rose had already run for her mother. Mrs. Carter arrived quickly, took one look at Sarah and sent the girls home. "Baby's coming," she said firmly, helping Sarah to her room. "And by the look of those clouds, the storm's not far behind." The wind picked up as the afternoon wore on, howling around the eaves like a hungry wolf. Sarah's labor progressed slowly, each contraction seeming to echo the storm's growing fury. Mrs. Carter kept watch by her bed, while her husband stood guard downstairs. "Where is he?" Sarah gasped during a brief respite between pains. The windows had gone dark with snow, and still no sign of Lucas. "He'll come," Mrs. Carter soothed, wiping Sarah's forehead. "That man would ride through hell itself to get back to you." Out on the trail, Lucas fought his way through the worsening storm. The supply run had gone badly. Harrison's men had made their threats clear, and not everyone in town had been willing to sell to him, but he'd gotten what they needed, filling his saddlebags with medicines, food, and hidden among them more books. The snow was falling so thickly now, he could barely see 10 feet ahead. His horse struggled through drifts that grew deeper by the minute. Somewhere in the whiteness, he heard wolves howl. Back at the ranch, Sarah's labor intensified. "Something's wrong," she heard Mrs. Carter whisper to her husband. "Baby's not turned right. We need the midwife." "No one could make it through this storm," Carter replied, "and even if they could, they all knew the midwife worked for Harrison's wife. Calling her would be like sending up a signal flare to their enemies." Sarah bit back a cry as another contraction seized her. She thought of Mary, of all her students past and present. She thought of Lucas, out there somewhere in the storm. She thought of her baby, fighting to enter a world that wasn't ready for her. "Tell me a story," she gasped to Mrs. Carter. Something to focus on." The older woman squeezed her hand. "Did I ever tell you about my grandmother? She was a teacher too, back in Boston. Said education was like planting flowers in a war zone, an act of hope, of defiance." The storm raged on, snow piling against the windows. Somewhere out in that howling whiteness, Lucas battled his way home, carrying precious supplies and more precious books. And in a warm room above the howling wind, a baby struggled to be born, while her mother fought another kind of battle, one that would help shape the territory's future, one child's mind at a time. In the stables, young Jim Tucker struggled with his conscience. The letter in his pocket seemed to burn like a hot coal. A message to Harrison revealing Sarah's location. The money they'd offered would save his sister's failing farm, but the cost. He thought of Miss Bennett teaching his niece to write her name, of the pride in the girl's eyes, but $20 was $20, and winter was coming hard. The storm had turned the world white when he saddled his horse. "Just business," he whispered, though the words tasted like ash. He'd waited until Lucas was gone, knowing the man would have seen the guilt in his face. Inside the main house, Sarah's labor had taken a dangerous turn. "Baby's breech," Mrs. Carter announced grimly. "Needs turning, and I'm not skilled enough for that." Sarah lay exhausted against the pillows, her face pale with pain. "Lucas, hush now. Carter's gone to meet him on the trail." But they all knew the storm made finding anyone nearly impossible. The wind rattled the windows as Jim Tucker rode through the whiteout, the letter secure in his breast pocket. He was halfway to town when he spotted Lucas's distinctive bay horse emerging from the storm like a ghost. Lucas took one look at Jim's, a face anew. "What did you do, boy?" Jim couldn't meet his eyes. "Mr. Harrison, he said no one would get hurt. Just wanted to know where she was." "My sister's farm." "How long ago did you send word?" "Didn't. Not yet." Jim pulled out the letter with trembling hands. "Was heading there now." Lucas's face hardened. "Give me the letter, Jim. Then ride east far as you can. Don't come back." "Mr. Drake, Now, boy, before I forget you're Billy Tucker's son." As Jim disappeared into the storm, Lucas read the letter quickly, then burned it with his tinderbox. The boy had included details about the ranch's defenses, the number of hands, everything Harrison would need to plan an attack. A rider emerged from the whiteness. Carter, his face grave. "Boss, it's Miss Bennett. Baby's coming wrong. Need help." Lucas spurred his horse toward home, provisions forgotten. They were halfway back when they heard it, hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming through the storm. "Harrison?" Carter asked. "No, worse." Lucas recognized the shapes materializing. From the snow, Ranchers Association. Ned Benson led the group, 5 hard-faced men behind him. "Been waiting for you, Drake. Association's called an emergency meeting regarding your guest, my ranch, my business." "Not anymore." Benson's smile was cold as the storm. "You're harboring a fugitive, teaching unauthorized persons against territory law. Associations voted. You're out, unless you turn her over." Lucas's hand moved to his gun. "That's not going to happen. Think carefully," Benson warned. "Storm this bad, anything could happen. Fire, accident. Lot of people could get hurt." The threat hung in the frozen air. Lucas thought of Sarah in pain and needing help, of the baby coming wrong, of all the people at the ranch depending on him. "You want an answer?" Lucas's voice cut through the wind. "Here it is. My father built that ranch as a place of learning. My mother taught anyone willing to learn. I fought a war to free people from others, deciding their fate. His eyes met each man's gaze. You want to take my ranch? Come try. But understand this, you're not just fighting me. You're fighting every parent who wants better for their children. Every woman who deserves the right to read and think for herself. And that's a war you'll never win. Benson's face darkened. You're making a mistake, Drake. No. Lucas turned his horse toward home. The mistake was thinking you could stop. Progress with threats. Carter, ride for the midwife in Miller's Creek. Tell her Sarah Bennett needs help. She'll understand. The association won't forget this, Benson called after him. Good. Lucas didn't look back. Because I want everyone to remember the day we chose knowledge over fear. The storm swallowed them as they rode for home. But Lucas's mind was already racing ahead. Harrison would be coming soon. Jim's aborted betrayal proved that. They needed to prepare to protect not just Sarah but everything she represented. Above the howling wind, he heard a wolf's lonely cry. The storm was getting worse, and somewhere in that warm house, Sarah was fighting her own battle. Lucas touched the books in his saddlebag, thinking of all they represented: hope, freedom, the future itself. Hold on, Sarah, he whispered into the storm. I'm coming home. Lucas reached the ranch just as the first torches appeared through the snow. His military experience told him everything he needed to know. Harrison's men had surrounded them under cover of the storm. The ranch's defense plans, carefully drawn months ago, would now be put to the test. Get everyone into the main house, he ordered Carter. Bring the horses into the barn. They're not taking anything from us tonight. Inside, Sarah's condition had worsened. Each contraction brought a new level of pain, but the baby refused to turn. Mrs. Carter dabbed her forehead with a cool cloth while keeping watch at the window. Lucas. Sarah grabbed his hand as he entered the room. The girls, are they safe? All the families are warned. No one's getting to them. He pressed a kiss to her damp forehead. You just focus on bringing our girl into the world. The word "our" hung in the air between them, a truth neither had spoken until now. A rock crashed through the downstairs window. Harrison! The voice carried through the storm. Send out the schoolteacher and no one else gets hurt. Lucas moved to the window, keeping to the shadows. He counted at least 15 men, probably more hidden in the swirling snow. They'd positioned themselves behind the outlying buildings, using his own ranch for cover. Mr. Drake! It was Mary Thompson's voice, high and frightened. She stood at the edge of the property with her father. They're coming up from the creek, too. Sarah tried to rise. Mary, stay still, Mrs. Carter ordered. That baby's not waiting for anyone. Lucas had already sprung into action, directing the ranch hands with the efficiency of a cavalry officer. Carter, take 4 men to the north barn. Williams, secure the back door. Everyone else, upstairs windows. No one shoots unless shot at. The ranch hands moved with grim determination. These men had worked beside Sarah, seen their daughters blossom under her teaching. This wasn't just about protecting their jobs anymore. Last chance, Drake, Harrison's voice again. The association's ruled against you. This is legal territory business now. Lucas checked his rifle, then positioned himself at the top of the stairs. Legal, he shouted back. Was it legal when you burned down her school? When you threatened children? A bullet splintered the doorframe. They'll rush us soon, Carter warned, returning from his position. Storm's getting worse. They'll want to finish this before they lose sight of the house completely. Sarah's cry of pain cut through the tension. Lucas felt torn in half, wanting to be upstairs with her, but knowing he needed to coordinate their defense. Lucas! Mrs. Carter called from above. We need that midwife. Baby's heart rate is dropping. The snow had turned to ice, coating the windows with a crystalline layer. Through it, Lucas saw movement, shapes trying to approach from multiple directions. He'd seen this strategy before in the war. They'd probe for weakness. Then the attack came from 3 sides at once. Bullets shattered windows as Harrison's men charged through the storm. The ranch hands returned fire, careful shots aimed. To warn rather than kill. No one wanted to be the first to draw blood. Fire! Someone shouted from outside. "Fire in the north barn!" Lucas's heart clenched. The north barn contained their winter feed, crucial for survival out here. But moving men to fight the fire would leave them exposed. A horse's whinny cut through the chaos, then another and another. Through the swirling snow, Lucas saw riders approaching. But these weren't Harrison's men. "The other ranches," Carter breathed. "They've come." Families who'd sent their daughters to learn. Ranch hands who'd learned to write their names. Wives who'd tasted the freedom that came with reading. They emerged from the storm like avenging angels, dozens of them, armed and determined. "Harrison!" A woman's voice this time. Mrs. Miller, the midwife, riding at their head. "Stand down! You're not just fighting one ranch anymore." Up in the bedroom, Sarah grabbed Mrs. Carter's hand. "What's happening?" The older woman smiled through tears. "Hope is happening, dear. Hope is happening." Lucas watched as Harrison's men fell back, confused by the unexpected reinforcements. The siege wasn't over. Men like Harrison didn't give up easily, but the balance had shifted. The light of knowledge, once lit, had spread like wildfire through the territory. A cry of pure pain came from upstairs, followed by Mrs. Carter's shout, "Lucas, it's time!" He took the stairs two at a time, leaving Carter to coordinate their newfound allies. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, an even more momentous battle was about to begin. Mrs. Miller burst into the bedroom, snow melting from her cloak, her midwife's bag clutched tight. "Everyone out except Mrs. Carter," she commanded, her experienced eyes taking in Sarah's condition. "This baby's waited long enough." Lucas hesitated at the door, his face etched with concern. Sarah reached for his hand. "Go. They need you downstairs. I'll be right below," he promised, pressing her fingers to his lips before leaving. Outside, the siege had settled into a tense standoff. Harrison's men had pulled back to the tree line, but their torches still flickered through the snow like angry fireflies. The Allied ranchers had formed a protective ring around the property, their presence a clear message. This was no longer just about one schoolteacher. Mrs. Miller worked quickly, her hands sure and gentle. "This little one's decided to come backward," she explained, preparing her instruments. "But we've handled breech births before, haven't we, Mrs. Carter?" Sarah gasped as another contraction seized her. "Why? Why are you helping me? Your husband—" "My husband sides with Harrison," Mrs. Miller said firmly, "but I side with life, and with any woman brave enough to fight for what's right." She shared a meaningful look with Mrs. Carter. "Besides, I've been teaching the younger midwives to read in secret for years. Hard to save lives if you can't read medical texts." A shot rang out below, followed by shouts. Sarah tried to rise, but Mrs. Miller held her down. "Focus on your baby. The men will handle Harrison." Downstairs, Lucas and Carter watched through frost-covered windows as riders approached under a white flag. Harrison led them, his face red with cold and rage. "Last chance, Drake," he called. "Send out the woman. We'll let the rest of you be." "You're outnumbered, Harrison," Lucas answered. "Go home before someone gets killed." "Outnumbered?" Harrison laughed bitterly. "I've got the whole town behind me. More men are coming. How long can you hold out? How much food you got stored? How much ammunition?" As if to emphasize his point, more torches appeared through the storm. But something was different about these new arrivals. "Boss," Carter whispered, "those aren't Harrison's men. Look who's leading them." Through the swirling snow, Lucas saw Mary Thompson riding beside her father, followed by other town families, parents of Sarah's former students, shopkeepers who'd secretly supplied her with books, wives who'd watched their daughters bloom under her teaching. "You're wrong, Harrison," Mary's young voice carried across the yard. "The town's not all behind you. We're not afraid anymore." Above, Sarah's labor reached its crisis point. "Push!" Mrs. Miller commanded. "Push now!" Sarah bore down, tears mixing with sweat. She thought of all her students, of their fierce desire to learn. If they could be brave, so could she. "I see the feet," Mrs. Carter announced. "Lord help us, she's coming." Outside, Harrison's men shifted uneasily as more townspeople arrived. They weren't just facing a few defiant ranchers anymore. They were facing their own neighbors, their own families. "Think about what you're defending," Harrison tried one last time. "A woman who'd upset the natural order, who'd fill our daughters' heads with dangerous ideas like reading." It was Mrs. Miller's assistant, Rebecca, speaking from the porch. "Like being able to help with the doctoring. Tell them how many lives we've saved since you taught us to read medical books, Mrs. Miller." A murmur went through the crowd. Even some of Harrison's men looked uncertain now. Upstairs, Sarah gathered her last strength. The pain was unbearable, but something else was building too, a sense of triumph, of righteousness. "The shoulders are the hard part," Mrs. Miller encouraged. "One more push," Sarah screamed, a sound of defiance as much as pain. Below, the sound carried across the siege line, causing everyone to pause. Then, cutting through the howling storm, came a new cry, high, angry, alive. "A girl!" Mrs. Carter's voice broke with joy. "A beautiful, healthy girl!" The baby's first wails echoed across the ranch yard. Harrison's men lowered their weapons, some removing their hats. No one, it seemed, wanted to be the one to shoot at a house where new life had just entered the world. Lucas took the stairs 3 at a time, arriving just as Mrs. Miller was wrapping the baby in clean linens. Sarah lay exhausted against the pillows, but her eyes shone with fierce pride as she held their daughter. "She's perfect," Lucas whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. "Just like her mother." "The storm's breaking," Mrs. Carter said from the window. "Look, you can see the stars." Sure enough, the snow was lessening, the clouds parting to reveal a bright moon. Below, Harrison's men were mounting up, turning away one by one, leaving their leader increasingly alone. Sarah looked down at her daughter, then up at Lucas. "Read to her?" she asked softly, nodding toward the copy of Jane Eyre on the bedside table. Lucas sat beside them, opened the book, and began to read. His voice carried through the open window. Across the battlefield their ranch had become, telling a story about a woman who refused to be bound by society's rules. One by one, the guns fell silent as everyone, friend and foe alike, stopped to listen. Dawn broke over Sanctuary Ranch, painting the snow-covered ground in shades of rose and gold. The siege lines had thinned overnight, with more of Harrison's men drifting away as the baby's cries reminded them of their own families waiting at home. Sarah sat propped up in bed, her newborn daughter nursing contentedly. They'd named her Hope, a declaration of faith in the future they were fighting for. Lucas hadn't left their side, his weathered hand gentle as he stroked the baby's dark curls. "She has your hair," Sarah whispered, "and my mother's nose." A soft knock interrupted them. Mrs. Miller entered, followed by an unexpected visitor, Harrison's wife, Catherine. Lucas tensed, but Catherine raised her hands in peace. "I came to see the baby," she said softly, "and to bring this." She pulled a birth certificate from her sleeve, already filled out with official seals. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she read it. Hope Bennett Drake, the surname a surprise that made her look questioningly at Lucas. "If you'll have us both," he said quietly. Catherine cleared her throat. "The timing's deliberate. Once it's filed, Harrison can't touch her, or you. A married woman's crimes don't carry over after her wedding." "Crimes?" Sarah's voice was steel. "Is that what we're calling education now?" "No." Catherine's face softened as she watched Hope nurse. "We're calling it the future. That's what I came to tell you. The town council's split. Wives are speaking up. Daughters are demanding answers. Even the minister's wife admitted she's been teaching their slave to read in secret." Outside, they could hear voices rising, but not in anger. Women from town had brought food, gathering in the yard to share breakfast with the ranch hands and remaining protesters. The smell of coffee and fresh bread drifted up through the floorboards. "Harrison's losing support," Catherine continued. "He doesn't know it yet, but this siege has backfired. Every time people look at this house, they don't see a rebellious schoolteacher anymore. They see a mother, a baby, a man defending his family. They see themselves." Mrs. Miller took Hope for her first examination, her experienced hands gentle. "Strong heartbeat," she announced. "Good color, she's perfect." "Like her mother," Lucas said, his voice rough with emotion. Catherine moved to the window, watching the gathering below. "When I was a girl, my grandmother taught me to read in secret. Said knowledge was a seed that once planted couldn't be stopped from growing." She turned back to Sarah. "You planted a lot of seeds here. They're starting to sprout." As if to prove her point, young voices drifted up from the yard. Mary. Thompson and the other girls had started a reading circle right there in the snow, sharing one of Sarah's rescued books. Their fathers stood awkwardly nearby, caught between old prejudices and new pride. "Harrison will fight this," Lucas warned. "Let him," Catherine replied. "He's fighting the tide, and he doesn't even know it." She placed the birth certificate on the bedside table. "I'll witness the wedding myself if you'll have me. Time for us women to stop hiding in the shadows." Sarah looked down at Hope, then up at Lucas. "What do you think, little one? Should we make it official?" The baby's only answer was to grip her father's finger with surprising strength. A commotion from below drew their attention. Harrison himself had ridden into the yard, but the scene that greeted him was far from what he'd expected. Instead of a battle line, he found a community gathering, women serving breakfast, children reading aloud, men from both sides sharing coffee and conversation. "You can't stop this," Catherine called down to her husband. "Look around you. This is progress." Harrison sat his horse, face red with impotent rage, as his wife stood alongside the very woman he'd sworn to drive out. One by one, the remaining protesters lowered their weapons. "File the certificate," Sarah said quietly. "Hope deserves a world where she won't have to hide her knowledge." Catherine nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. This wasn't just about one baby, one marriage, one school. This was about all the daughters yet to come, all the minds yet to be awakened. "Welcome to the family," she said, touching Hope's tiny hand. "Both of you." Outside, the sun climbed higher, melting the snow and revealing the first hints of spring beneath. Like Catherine had said, seeds were sprouting, of knowledge, of change, of hope. And no force on earth could stop them from growing now. Within days of Hope's birth, change swept through the territory like a spring wind. It started small. A petition circulating among the townswomen, passed hand to hand in kitchens and at church socials. The signatures grew daily, each name a quiet act of rebellion. Sarah sat in the ranch house library, Hope sleeping in a cradle beside her desk as she read the latest letter from Mary Thompson. The girl's handwriting had grown confident, her words clear and strong. "Dear Miss Bennett, though they say I should call you Mrs. Drake now, something wonderful is happening in town. Mother spoke up at the general store yesterday when Mr. Harrison was talking against you. She said, if reading makes a woman dangerous, then she's proud to be dangerous. Then she showed everyone her own signature on the petition. Father didn't know what to say, but I saw him smile when he thought no one was looking." Lucas entered quietly, not wanting to wake the baby. "More riders coming," he said, but his tone was light. "Looks like the Miller family this time." Sarah moved to the window. Rebecca Miller, the midwife's apprentice, led a group of women on horseback. They carried books and slates, tools of the trade they'd once had to hide. "The midwives have started their own school," Rebecca announced when Sarah met them outside. "Mrs. Miller says if we're going to save lives, we need to read everything we can about medicine. But we need a teacher." She held out a formal letter. "Will you help us?" Sarah opened it, recognizing Catherine Harrison's elegant handwriting. It was an official teaching license, signed by members of the town council, including, surprisingly, 3 of the men who'd stood with Harrison during the siege. "How did you manage this?" Rebecca smiled. "We stopped hiding what we knew, started showing how useful education could be. When Betty Jones used her reading to save the general store's accounts from ruin, her father changed his vote. When Martha Wheeler wrote to Chicago for new farming techniques and doubled her family's crop yield, the council couldn't ignore that." Inside, Hope began to cry. Sarah excused herself to tend to her daughter, finding Lucas already there, cradling the baby with practiced ease. "You should see this," she said, showing him the license. He studied it, then looked at her with pride. "They're finally seeing what I saw all along." A commotion outside drew their attention. Harrison had ridden up with what remained of his supporters, a much smaller group than before. But this time they faced an unexpected obstacle. Their own wives and daughters formed a line across the road. "Move aside," Harrison demanded. "This is men's business." "Not anymore." Catherine Harrison's voice rang out clear and firm. She held up a stack of papers. "We have something to show you." Sarah watched from the porch as Catherine began to read. Accounts of lives saved by educated midwives, crops improved by new techniques, businesses saved by women who could read and cipher. With each example, more of Harrison's men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. "And here," Catherine continued, "are the test scores from the girls Miss Bennett taught. Compare them to their brothers' scores from the boys' school. See for yourself who's really been holding our children back." Harrison's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is manipulation. Women weren't meant for—" "For what, Pa?" Mary Thompson stepped forward, her chin raised. "For thinking? For helping our families prosper? For making our territory stronger?" One by one, Harrison's supporters began to drift away, called home by wives and daughters who'd found their voices. Even his most loyal men couldn't ignore the evidence before them or the determination in their families' eyes. "This isn't over," Harrison growled, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "You're right," Sarah said, walking down to join the women. Hope slept peacefully in her arms, oblivious to the history being made around her. "It's just beginning." Lucas joined her, his hand steady at her back. Together they watched as Catherine presented the petition to the remaining council members, over 200 signatures, each one a testament to the quiet revolution that had been building all along. "The council will vote tomorrow," Catherine announced, "on whether to establish a proper school, open to all." She looked pointedly at her husband. "And I suggest you think carefully about your position, Thomas. The territory's changing. You can change with it, or be left behind." As Harrison rode away, defeated not by violence but by the very education he'd fought against, Sarah looked around at the gathered women. They stood tall, unafraid, their hidden knowledge finally brought into the light. "Well," she said, smiling at her daughter, "shall we begin our first official lesson?" The answering cheer was loud enough to wake Hope, but the baby didn't cry. She simply opened her eyes, taking in the scene around her. Women and men together, learning and teaching, building a future where knowledge knew no gender. The revolution wasn't fought with guns, after all, but with books and determination, with quiet courage and unwavering belief in the power of education to change the world, one mind at a time. The town hall was packed tighter than a winter storm cellar. Sarah stood at the podium, Hope sleeping peacefully in Lucas's arms at the front row. The council members sat stern-faced before her, Harrison among them, though his usual bluster had dimmed. "I'm not here to apologize," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady. "Not for teaching, not for believing in our daughters, and certainly not for suggesting that knowledge belongs to everyone." Catherine Harrison, seated prominently with the other townswomen, nodded encouragement. The room held its breath. "But I'm here to thank you," Sarah continued, surprising everyone. "Thank you for showing our girls exactly why education is so vital. Every threat, every attempt to silence us, every book burned, you've proven why we must learn to think for ourselves." Movement at the back of the hall caught her eye. Mary Thompson slipped in with a group of students, past and present. They carried books, rescued, borrowed, and cherished. "Look at them," Sarah gestured to the girls. "Really look. These are your daughters, your granddaughters, the future of this territory. When you tell them they can't learn, can't grow, can't dream, what are you really protecting?" Harrison shifted uncomfortably as his own daughter stood among the students. "The natural order," he began. "The natural order." Sarah's laugh held no bitterness, only certainty. Nature gives us minds meant to grow, hearts meant to soar. When you lock away knowledge, you're not protecting order, you're fighting nature itself. Lucas stood, hope still cradled in one arm. "I fought in the war," he said, his voice carrying authority earned in battle. "Saw men die for freedom. But freedom isn't just about chains. It's about choices, about becoming who you're meant to be." The council members murmured among themselves. Sarah could see the change in their faces, the slow recognition that they were witnessing not just a town dispute, but a transformation of their entire society. Mary stepped forward, holding up a book. "This is my mother's medical journal. She started it after Miss Bennett taught her to write. Last month, she saved my little brother's life because she could read about fever treatments." Other girls followed, each with a story. Better crop yields from reading agricultural guides, increased profits from learning arithmetic, letters connecting families across the territory. The evidence was undeniable. "I'm not asking for revolution," Sarah said softly. "I'm asking for evolution, for the chance to make this territory stronger by educating all its people, not just half." Rebecca Miller stood. "The midwives support this motion. We've seen too many lives lost to ignorance." "The Ranchers Association stands with Mrs. Drake," Carter called from the back. "Educated women make better partners, better mothers, better." Community members, one by one, supporters rose. Shopkeepers who'd seen their businesses thrive with educated daughters helping. Farmers whose wives' reading had improved their techniques. Even the minister stood, surprising everyone. "The good book says let there be light," he intoned. "Knowledge is light. Who are we to dim God's creation?" Harrison looked around the room, seeing his support crumbling like spring ice. His wife caught his eye, her expression both challenge and invitation. A chance to be on the right side of history. Sarah concluded simply, "We can fight this change, waste more time and energy trying to hold back progress, or we can embrace it, guide it, make it work for all of us. The choice is yours." Lucas brought hope forward. The baby awakened, looking around with bright, curious eyes. Sarah touched her daughter's small hand. "This is what we're really deciding today. Not just about schools or books or who gets to learn what. We're deciding what kind of world she'll inherit, one of shadows and limitations, or one of light and possibility." The council members huddled together, their discussion intense but brief. The head councilman stood, clearing his throat. "We've seen the petition, heard the testimonies, witnessed the changes in our own families." He paused, looking directly at Sarah. "The council recognizes that progress cannot be stopped. Better to guide it than fight it. The motion to establish a proper school, open to all, is approved." A hall erupted in cheers. Sarah felt Lucas's arm around her waist, strong and supporting. Harrison sat motionless until his wife touched his shoulder. Finally, he gave a single sharp nod. Not quite acceptance, but no longer opposition. Outside, the spring sun broke through clouds, warming the earth. Sarah held her daughter close, watching the townspeople celebrate. The war wasn't completely won. Change never came easily. But the light of knowledge, once lit, would never again be extinguished in this territory. Not everyone accepted the council's decision peacefully. As Sarah and Lucas left the town hall, they found Ned Benson waiting with a group of hardliners, their faces dark with anger. "Might have fooled the council," Benson spat. "But some of us still know right from wrong. This territory was built by men who understood proper order." Instead of backing away, Sarah handed hope to Lucas and stepped forward. The crowd that had spilled out from the town hall grew silent, watching. "You want to talk about how this territory was built?" Her voice carried across the street. "Let me tell you about Mary Thompson's mother, who kept the accounts that saved 3 ranches during the drought of '73. About Mrs. Miller, who's delivered every baby born here in the last decade, using knowledge she fought to learn in secret. She took another step forward, making Benson retreat despite himself. This territory wasn't just built by men with guns and plows. It was built by women with wisdom and courage, by people who dared to learn, to grow, to change. The town clerk hurried out of the hall, clutching the meeting minutes. "It's official. The school charter's been recorded. Mrs. Drake has full authority to teach, with funding from the territory budget." Benson's face turned purple. "You can't expect us to pay for this madness." "Actually," Catherine Harrison stepped forward, document in hand, "the funding's already secured. While you were busy threatening a pregnant woman, we were busy proving the economic benefits of education." She began reading figures: increased productivity, improved commerce, reduced accidents and illness due to better record-keeping and medical knowledge. "Numbers don't lie, Mr. Benson," she finished crisply. "Education pays for itself." But Benson wasn't finished. He drew himself up, looking past Sarah to his fellow ranchers. "Anyone who sends their daughters to this school will regret it, will remember who stood where today." "Yes," Lucas's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of his cavalry days. "We will." He handed hope back to Sarah and moved to stand beside her. "We'll remember who chose fear over progress, who tried to keep their own children from growing, stronger and smarter." "Who's going to work the ranches if girls start getting ideas above their station?" one of Benson's supporters demanded. "My daughter helps with the ranch accounts," Carter called out. "Does them twice as fast as I ever." "Good. Made us an extra $1,000 last season by finding better suppliers through letter writing." More voices joined in, sharing stories of how education had improved their lives, their businesses, their families. Benson's group grew smaller as men slipped away, convinced by practical results, if not principle. "This isn't what my father fought for," Benson tried one last time. "No," Sarah agreed, surprising him. "Your father fought for a better future. That's exactly what we're building here." She looked around at the gathered crowd. Every parent wants their children to have more than they had, to reach higher, dream bigger, go further. Why would we deny our daughters that same chance? Hope began to fuss, ready for her feeding. The baby's cry seemed to break the tension, reminding everyone that life moved forward, that change came, whether you fought it or embraced it. "The school opens Monday," Sarah announced. "All are welcome, even those who opposed us." She looked directly at Benson. "Knowledge isn't just for those who already agree with us. It's for everyone brave enough to learn." Catherine stepped up beside her. "The first class will be reading and writing. The second, business mathematics." She smiled at her former opponents. "Unless you gentlemen don't want your ranches to benefit from modern accounting methods?" The practical appeal of profit, finally, broke through where moral arguments hadn't. Even Benson couldn't ignore the potential advantages. He gave a grudging nod before turning away, his remaining supporters trailing after him like shadows at sunset. As the crowd dispersed, Lucas drew Sarah and Hope close. "Proud of you," he murmured. "Proud of us," she corrected. "All of us. This victory belongs to everyone who dared to learn, to teach, to change." Mary Thompson approached with her father. "Miss Bennett, Mrs. Drake," she corrected herself. "I was wondering, could I help with the younger students? I've been practicing my letters with Ma, and..." "That's exactly how change spreads," Sarah smiled, "each one teaching another." The sun was setting over the territory, painting the sky in colors of promise. Sarah looked down at Hope, then out at the town that had tried to drive her away and now embraced her purpose. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "Just think what these girls will teach their own daughters someday." Lucas squeezed her hand. "And their sons." Sarah nodded. "Everyone free to learn, to grow, to become their best selves. That's worth any fight." The evening air carried the sound of hope. Voices discussing Monday's classes, making plans, sharing. Dreams too long deferred, but finally within reach. The schoolhouse rose from the earth like a prayer answered. Men who had once opposed Sarah now worked alongside their supporters, raising walls that would shelter generations of learning. The sound of hammers and saws filled the spring air, punctuated by children's voices as they helped where they could. Sarah stood with hope in her arms, watching Lucas direct the construction. He'd drawn up the plans himself, incorporating ideas from every family: big windows for natural light, a library, corner, even a science area for simple experiments. "Never seen men work so fast," Mrs. Carter remarked, joining Sarah with a basket of lunch for the workers. "Amazing what can happen when people find a cause worth building for." The cause had indeed united the territory in unexpected ways. Harrison's men now worked beside Lucas's ranch hands, their former antagonism forgotten in the shared purpose of creation. Even Benson had grudgingly contributed lumber after his wife pointed out how a proper school would raise property values. "Miss Bennett!" Mary called out, hurrying over with an armful of books. "Look what came on the stage from back east." She displayed the treasures: readers, arithmetic texts, and something that made Sarah's heart skip, a brand new copy of Jane Eyre. "Mrs. Harrison ordered them special," Mary explained, "said every proper school needs a proper library." Catherine. Harrison had become one of their strongest allies, using her social connections to gather support and supplies. She'd even convinced her husband to donate his old globe and maps, arguing that an educated territory would attract more settlers and investment. Lucas climbed down from the roof, wiping sweat from his brow as he approached Sarah. "Think your mother would approve?" he asked softly, nodding toward the building taking shape. Sarah thought of her mother's last letter, still treasured in her journal. She'd say it's perfect, though she might suggest more bookshelves. "Already planned for that," Lucas grinned. "Secret panels in the walls, extra storage space for when the library grows." Their hands met, fingers intertwining naturally. These quiet moments had become more frequent lately, their partnership deepening beyond their shared cause into something more personal, more precious. "Pa says you're staying on at the ranch," Mary said, her young face knowing. "Even after the school's built?" Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Well, it makes sense. The ranch is centrally located for all the students, and Lucas keeps finding reasons to add on to your quarters." Mary finished with a smile. "Betty Jones says her pa's taking bets on when the wedding will be." "Mary Thompson," Mrs. Carter scolded, but her eyes twinkled. Lucas squeezed Sarah's hand. "Might be nice," he said quietly, "making it official, if you're ready." Sarah looked at their joined hands, then at Hope, who was reaching for Lucas with complete trust. "I think we've been building more than just a school here." The construction continued around them, but for a moment they stood in their own quiet world. Lucas touched Hope's cheek gently. "Never thought I'd have a family again after losing my parents. Never thought I'd find someone who saw the world the way I do. Someone who believes in fighting for what's right?" Sarah asked. "Someone who believes in building something better." He gestured to the schoolhouse, then to the ranch beyond. "All this, it's not just about education anymore. It's about showing what's possible when people work together instead of against each other." A cheer went up from the workers as the last roof beam was set in place. Sarah watched as mothers who'd hidden their own learning now proudly displayed their skills, helping to paint letters above the door. "Territory School. All welcome." "There's still so much to do," Sarah mused. "So many minds to open. So many battles ahead." Lucas's arm slipped around her waist. "Good thing you're not fighting alone anymore." The spring breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut lumber and new possibilities. Sarah remembered that frightening night when she'd fled through the snow, carrying only her books and her unborn child. She'd been searching for sanctuary then, but she'd found something far greater, a community ready to grow, a man who shared her vision, and a future bright with promise. "No," she agreed, leaning into his strength. "Not alone at all." Hope gurgled happily, reaching for one of Mary's books. Around them the territory was changing, growing, learning. The school would open its doors soon, but in truth, the real education had already begun, in yards where mothers now openly taught their children, in ranch houses where families read together by lamplight, in hearts that had learned to embrace change instead of fear it. And it had all started with a simple belief that knowledge, like love, only grows stronger when it's shared. 1 year later, the schoolhouse buzzed with excitement. Flowers decorated every surface, and proud parents filled the benches. Sarah stood before the first graduating class, her heart full as she looked at their shining faces. Hope sat in Lucas's lap in the front row, now a toddler reaching for the colorful ribbons on the graduate certificates. "When I first came to this territory," Sarah began, "I thought I was just teaching girls to read, but you taught me something far more important, that education isn't just about books and figures. It's about courage, the courage to question, to grow, to become more than what others expect of you." Mary Thompson, the first to receive her certificate, stood straighter in her new dress. Beside her, the other graduates, 12 girls, and, to everyone's surprise, 3 boys who had asked to join the classes, waited for their moment. These certificates, Sarah held one up, represent more than academic achievement. They represent a community's transformation, a territory that chose to embrace progress instead of fear it. Harrison, sitting with his wife Catherine, nodded slightly. His own daughter was among the graduates, her essay on territorial law having earned special recognition. The changes he'd once fought had brought prosperity to the region, attracting new settlers drawn by the promise of education for all their children. "Each of you," Sarah continued, "has already begun to make your mark. Mary's medical studies, with Mrs. Miller, Elizabeth's work improving the ranch accounts, Thomas's engineering drawings for the new bridge." She smiled at the boy who'd insisted that if his sisters could learn, he wanted to learn more too. Lucas stood, hope balanced, on his hip, and joined Sarah at the front. "Time to present the certificates," he said softly, then louder to the crowd. "But first, if you'll indulge us, we have another ceremony to perform." Sarah's breath caught as Lucas handed Hope to Mrs. Carter. They had planned this moment carefully, wanting to share it with the entire community that had become their family. "A year ago," Lucas said, taking Sarah's hand, "a brave woman taught us all about fighting for what's right. She taught me about love, love of knowledge, love of justice, and," he smiled down at her, "love that grows stronger through every challenge." The minister stepped forward, his Bible open to a passage about wisdom and understanding. Sarah and Lucas turned to face each other, their hands joined before the same community that had once been divided over her presence. "I take you," Sarah's voice was clear and strong, "as my partner in all things, in teaching, in building, in believing in the power of change." "I take you," Lucas responded, "as my partner in all things, in standing firm, in staying true, in creating a world worthy of our daughter." After they were pronounced husband and wife, Sarah turned back to her graduates. "Your certificates," she said, joy making her voice tremble slightly, "and my challenge to you. Never stop learning. Never stop teaching others. Never stop believing in the power of knowledge to light the darkness." One by one they came forward, students who had started in secret now graduating openly, proudly. Mary was first, her certificate marking her apprenticeship with Mrs. Miller to become the territory's next midwife. Each graduate represented a dream once forbidden, now flowering in the light of day. As the celebration continued around them, Lucas drew Sarah and Hope aside. "Look," he said softly, nodding toward the schoolhouse door. New families were arriving, drawn by news of the ceremony, already asking about enrollment for the next term. "We'll need a bigger school soon," Sarah observed, bouncing Hope gently. "Already drawn up the plans," Lucas grinned. "Seems Hope might have quite a few classmates when her time comes." Sarah looked out at their community, no longer divided, no longer afraid. Harrison, deep in discussion with his daughter about Her law studies, Benson's wife teaching a group of women about crop rotation, Mary showing her medical texts to curious younger students. "Not bad," she said softly, "for a pregnant schoolteacher who dared to teach girls to read." Lucas kissed her temple. "Not bad at all, Mrs. Drake, not bad at all." Hope reached for one of the graduation ribbons, her small face bright with curiosity. Around them, the future they'd fought for was already blooming, as natural and unstoppable, as spring after winter, as vital as knowledge itself.